You are listening to the Pencil and Paper Podcast Network.
You're listening to the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. We hope you enjoy the show.
Haha, this is the Horror Ramblings Podcast, the show about all things horror. I am your host, Lester Blosser, joined by my co-host and good friend, the extremely talented Stephen White. Hello, how are you doing today, Stephen?
Doing all right. How about yourself?
Oh, not too bad. I thought I would ask you today, because I know we've kind of chit-chatted a little bit. Have you seen any good new TV shows lately, or listened to any good new podcasts?
Well, let's see. What have I got in store for everyone today? First of all, I guess I want to do a shout out. By the time this comes out, it'll already be in its fourth season. The Last Drive-In's back on Shudder. So I would highly recommend getting back into that. The episode that just aired, which was their first episode, they did kind of their 100th movie anniversary. And I, unfortunately, did not make it through the entire film, or films in general, but I did kind of get up to speed as to how the show went. They showed Night of the Living Dead, and the reason they did that is because Joe Bob pointed out that this was one of the seminal drive-in features. This is one that a lot of horror hosts have hosted because it's in public domain. It's popular because of that. And he said, obviously everyone has said just about all there is to say about the film, but he's going to try to put in his 2 cents and add some new wrinkles. Like one in particular that he actually argued in favor of the movie being in public domain, actually benefiting it overall, saying that the movie could have just fallen into obscurity. Studios could have held on to it, or it got lost in rights issues from point A to point B. But yet, since it wound up in public domain almost immediately, once it was released, everyone saw it, everyone knew it, and it just got distributed more and more and more, and it was just everywhere. So because of that, the zombie franchise was alive, and everyone could see a zombie movie. And then it just gained its popularity, and because of that, it was a benefit, despite, maybe not making any money off of it. So it's a good point. I never really thought of it that way, but yeah, it's a good point.
Availability is key.
Yeah. So I highly recommend checking that out if you haven't seen whatever movies he's playing. I think the second one, that's the one I definitely didn't get to. It was an Italian zombie film. It was one that I wasn't familiar with. Like the name even eludes me right now. So I couldn't tell you who it was, but I know it was an Italian zombie film. So if that's your bag, not necessarily mine. I think I've mentioned that before here. Some of those Italian horror films are just so slow and they drag so hard. So if that's your bag, yeah, go for it. Another one that I watched, which I'm also happy with, is Cursed Films. Have you also been watching that on Shudder?
I have not checked it out yet. I know we've talked about it. I'm getting ready to full-fledged watch it in some of my free time.
Okay. They're on their second season with that show, where they pretty much dig deep, because you hear all these legends about certain movies that they were cursed. We've heard the curse of Poltergeist or the Twilight Zone, and obviously there were some terrible things that, happened on those sets. So they explore the curse of the films and what kind of brought that about, or what it's pertaining to. Some really freaky stuff, some of the stories that you hear. And there's this one that's like in the back of my head that I remember hearing in a previous episode. I don't feel like it was this season. I feel like it was last season, but it was just uncanny. I think it was in the Omen movie is what they were talking about. And it had something to do with an airline. I'm not gonna tell the story because I can't remember all the details. But it was just like, if that happened to me, I probably would kind of have pause and be like, holy shit, I don't know if I should be doing this anymore, but whatever, okay. But the movies that they've covered thus far this season that I can remember, they started with The Wizard of Oz, which was an odd choice because most of the films that they've talked about have kind of had horror elements or supernatural, movies, things like that. So The Wizard of Oz felt like, oh, okay, well, but it has had a history. We've all heard the story about the hanging munchkin in the background, and how that all pertains. They cover that extensively, which I thought was kind of interesting.
Yeah, that movie had a lot with it. The original Tin Man actor was allergic to the makeup.
They talked about that.
The Wicked Witch, after her first stunt, she got her face burned really badly.
Mm-hmm. Talked about that. Yeah. So there were a lot of details that I feel like I'd heard in passing, but to what degree or how detailed they were talking about them.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, they explore them a little deeper. Rosemary's Baby, I think, was another one that they covered.
That's a good one.
Another movie that I had never heard of, but it seemed very, like, it would be something worth looking into, is called Stalker. And I think it takes place in the Ukraine, ironically now, talking about it. And it's about people who travel into Chernobyl, which seems like, why would you do that?
Yeah.
And apparently there are actual people today that do those. Like, we'll take people through a guided tour through Chernobyl, but obviously in the safest areas possible.
No thanks.
Yeah, no, exactly. I'm not that keen on doing that. And I think the last movie they covered that I watched was Serpent in the Rainbow, which I have never seen, unfortunately.
If you get the chance, it's on Shudder. That is one of my favorite films, and it's very loosely based off of it, but where it takes place, they would drug people, and you would think that you were dead, and they would bury people in shallow graves. So these people would get, they'd wake up, and they'd dig themselves out of these shallow graves, and people would see them and everything else, and everybody would think, oh my God, this person's a zombie, or whatnot. A fun fact about that film, I can't think of his name, but the main actor in the film,
Bill Pullman.
Thank you. He actually met a real witch doctor, a real voodoo witch doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And the witch doctor asked him if he believed in voodoo. And he said he wasn't sure. And the witch doctor told him, you will. I guess Wes Craven woke up to him on his balcony in his underwear in this just chilly night, smoking cigarettes. You probably heard that on there, didn't you?
Not his underwear. He was stark naked.
That's right. He was naked. Yep. But yeah.
They told that story, and it was like, oh wow, okay. They spoke to Bill Pullman on that, which I was happy to see that he was a part of it. They spoke to Jonathan Craven because he was actually there. Like, this was like one of the first movies that he was actually part of with his dad.
Yeah,
which that was kind of neat that they were able to have some insight from someone who knew Wes, and then was actually related to him. So you had that story. I did not realize, you would probably recognize him right off the top of your head or the moment you saw him, but they were talking to the special effects person of the film.
Mm-hmm.
Did not realize that was Heather Langenkamp's husband.
A lot of people don't.
And
what he looks like.
He mentioned that in the like toward the end of the show, because he spoke about how, he knew Wes, and he said it's the weirdest thing. He said, I didn't ask Heather's father for her hand in marriage. I asked Wes. He's like, I felt like that was the more appropriate thing. And I was like, okay. I mean, but yeah, I thought that was interesting. But the story itself, like you said, they go into the lore of Haitian voodoo, and the just how that's a part of the culture. And they actually spoke to the author of Serpent in the Rainbow and how he wanted to have a serious film made about the subject material, because it is kind of based on him
Yeah.
and his story. And he was worried that with the wrong people, it would turn into the usual generic everybody. It's this insensitive slant to, the culture, where it's like, oh yeah, we all have this preconceived notion about what, voodoo rituals and stuff is, and he wanted to have it portrayed proper.
Yeah.
And even with Wes, who was trying, I think they said when he approached the material, he was trying to get away from horror. At the time, it was like, yeah, I want to try to do something different, but this kind of teetered a line.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And so he felt like this would be his way to kind of start moving out into that. And even by the time they were done, there was a lot that goes on into it. You have to watch it to actually get all the details, because it's pretty insane. But even the author felt by the end of it, the final product turned into the very thing that he was trying to avoid.
Yeah.
And he was worried about it, but over time he has learned to accept what it is, and he's let it go. And they even spoke to people in Haiti who they screened the movie for, and there was one person who said this is perfection on a proper representation. Mm-hmm. So despite what he may have thought, they seem to embrace it, and that's great. And I'm happy to see that for them. Because I can understand, they talk about that a lot, in the documentary, about how it just, you look at all those old, like, White Zombie and from the 30s with Bela Lugosi, and a lot of that preconceived white view of what voodoo culture is, you know, and it's the same nonsense. So I could understand where you'd want someone to do it right. But the guy who was sitting there praising the movie did say, I think we need to have a Haitian director to make a Haitian, film based around voodoo that's accurate to us and represented by us. So he kind of called a challenge for Haitian filmmakers to do so. And I would love to see that. If
that would be amazing, actually.
Yeah. Do
a
remake.
Now, I do have to mention something. Wes Craven, I have to say this because I have a deep love for Wes Craven. I love what he used to say, because he did try to get away from the horror genre quite a bit. He did a film with Meryl Streep. It wasn't a horror film. And he kept his name actually as hidden as he possibly could from it, because there was a stigma around him because of how well he did at the horror genre. And he used to say, if I'm going to be a caged bird, I'm going to sing the most beautiful song I can sing. Because he knew that he would probably never escape making horror movies.
Yeah.
And that led to some amazing movies. And on another thing that you said, seeing his son talk about him and everything, there's another series that I have to kind of shout out because it did the same thing. It actually showed old clips of Wes Craven in interviews, and it showed his son, and that is The Movies That Made Us on Netflix.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That is another one of those series that is really cool, and I love that they actually focused on Freddy Krueger. They talked about Freddy in a few ways that they never really had before. And I know that they've done it for, I think, Michael Myers. I don't know if they've done Jason yet. I can't remember off the top of my head. I think they did the Alien movies as well. Yeah.
They hit a lot of 80s. That usually seems to be their bag, somewhere in the 80s, 90s, kind of in that box.
Yeah, and 80s horror is a whole different breed of horror, and I think it's one of the better ones.
Oh, yeah.
In all honesty.
Yeah.
Now, I know you've talked about some series. I think you had said something to me about there was a podcast that you'd been listening to as well.
Well, there was one other series I wanted to bring before the podcast.
Go ahead.
No, it's fine. It just started now. By the time this comes out, I don't know how many episodes it'll be in. It may be done, because I feel like it's one of those, it's a British produced TV show, but they're releasing it on HBO Max, so it's that special, we're going to release it over here on this, but it's produced in Britain, and it's a horror. I feel like it's a dark comedy, or at least that's what it's being presented as. and it's called The Baby. Now, when I saw a trailer for it, I thought, okay, let me take a look at this. Now, I have heard of a movie, a horror film, I don't know if you've heard of this one, I'm sure you have, called The Baby. It was made in the 70s, and that's a messed up movie in its own right. And it's not based on that, so don't assume it's about a grown-ass man who's a man-child. No, this is about... The very first episode, this is all I've seen, so this is all I have to base it on. This woman whose friends are having babies all around her, she just, she seems like she's having troubles in her life, like she's just not really sure how her life's going to go. Everyone's moving on, they're having their lives, and she's just like, whatever, I got to escape. So she goes out to a cabin, she's just looking to unwind for a weekend, and while she's there, a person falls from a cliff because this cabin is sitting right near a cliff. This body just lands on the beach outside the house, and she's like, holy shit. And then about 10 seconds later, a baby drops into her arms, and she's like, oh my God. And from here, she doesn't know what to do because, here's a baby. It's not hers. Okay, so she calls the cops. Cops investigate. She hands the baby off to the cops, and then it's like, all right, I'm done, and that's the end of my weekend. I guess I'm going home. Well, 10 seconds later, the cops die. Baby's fine. Car wreck. Like a boulder just fell on their car. So it seems like this series of unfortunate events that always seems to happen around this child where people die, except this one woman, like it's taken to her, and she's just trying to unload this baby. And it just continues down this path. And that's how it went pretty much for the first episode. So I'm really curious to know what is going on, because it raises a lot of questions. But it's insanity. But you have to have that dark humor slant to it to really enjoy it. So if you don't like dark humor, it might not be your bag. But I was thoroughly entertained.
And so they already have the first episode out then.
Yes.
I am going to have to check this out.
I think that airs, like new episodes come out on Sundays. So definitely check it out if you can. I highly recommend it. It was just insanity, but in all the best ways. Sometimes when it's just this bizarre concept, but it's fascinating enough for me to just be like, all right, I want to see more of this. And I really did. Like by the time that episode ended, I was like, oh, I need more. I want another episode right now. And so I think I'm in for the ride. Hopefully it'll pay off in the end. But I would also assume, since this is a British produced television show, it'll probably be 6 episodes. That seems to be their trend. Yeah. So, and they're only 30 minutes, so it's a pretty short watch. So you might want to wait if you're a binge watcher. You can wait a couple of weeks.
It could be a limited run. I mean, they did that Dracula series a while back. Mm-hmm. It was really good, but it was a limited run.
Yeah.
They picked the perfect guy to play Dracula. I thought he nailed it. Yeah,
he had a very old school Bela Lugosi quality to him.
Yeah,
but still kind of modern. Like he towed a line, and it was wonderful. I actually saw him in another show recently, and I didn't. It's like I recognized him. And I was like, I know that dude. He was Dracula, and I looked it up, and sure enough, it was him. And I was like, ha! I knew it.
Have you ever seen?
He's a great actor.
Have you ever seen the billboard that they had for that show?
I don't think so.
So if you get the chance to Google it,
okay,
you have to look it up. So it has a light. The billboard has a light during the day. It has a light that is on one side of it, and it shines. And they have these. They look like stakes in the billboard. And when it gets dark out and the light shines on them, it actually creates the shadow of Dracula with his mouth open and his fangs showing. Perfect marketing. Yeah, perfect marketing. Oh, yeah. Random little fun fact.
So now the podcast that I was going to talk about,
yes,
because I did want to shout these guys out. Now, this is not a horror podcast, so if you're looking for another horror podcast, I apologize. But that doesn't mean that they wouldn't talk about horror films at some point, because that's the beauty of this podcast. It's called Podcasters Assemble. And I didn't get into the show until maybe like season 3, I think it was. And the premise of the podcast was one of the most original ideas I'd ever heard for a podcast. And there might be others out there like it. I've never seen them, never heard of them. But you know how you get podcasts, like, say, us two chumps, we're sitting here and we're like, hey, we're going to talk about, whatever horror movie we love and whatever great horror movie came out, and that's what we're going to talk about this week. And we just talk about the movie, just you and me. Okay? Everybody does that. These guys send out open submissions. So, say they're going to talk about, they'll set a theme. Like the very first one they did, I think, were the Marvel movies. Mm-hmm. And they open submissions to any and every podcaster out in the world. So say, hey, we're going to talk about Captain America this week. So you record 5 to 15 minutes worth of thoughts, feelings that you have for the movie, whether you love it, you hate it, and then they edit them together, and you have this beautiful juxtaposition of people 1 minute saying, oh man, I love this so much, and then you might have someone next, this is the stupidest movie I've ever seen. And it just, the marriage of the opinions is so well edited that it's just an entertaining listen. And they'll go through the entire movie just like you normally would in one of these podcasts. So you'll have someone kind of guiding the narrative and then how we feel about the actors. Some people love certain actors, some people hate them. And it's just so entertaining. At least I think so. So since season 3 is since when I jumped aboard, I think when they started talking about Godzilla, I think Godzilla vs. Kong was about to come out. So they chose, since there are so many, they chose select Godzilla films, they chose select King Kong films, and then ended up at the end with Godzilla vs. Kong, and then your final thoughts for that film. They're doing Batman now. So we went through the first 4 from Burton to Batman and Robin, and then we're going through the Dark Knight trilogy, and then we'll cap it with The Batman. And it's so good, and it's so amazing to listen to people's opinions. And granted, I mean, we all know people are going to hate on Batman and Robin, but I try to be positive. I mean, I can say what I can. And I usually try to at least bring some sort of history or knowledge or something to the table. So I'm not just sitting there going, well, this is what happened in the movie. And, oh, my God, that was stupid. Or, oh, my God, that was so amazing. I try, because everybody else is going to be doing that. You know what I mean? They're all going to be talking about this is what happened. This is what happened. I want to put my own spin on it. It's a lot of fun. If you are a podcaster and you have strong feelings about a movie that they're talking about, I highly recommend looking into it over at probablywork.com. We can put that in the show notes so y'all can go take a look. They have a list of all the episodes that they're looking to cover. They have deadlines as to when they'd like to have submissions in, so you know how soon. And again, you don't have to, it doesn't have to be pre-written amazing stuff. If you just want to say, oh man, I love this movie, this is the greatest thing, and they'll promote your stuff too. So if you've got an ad for your podcast, you can submit it to them and they'll splice it into the episode, so you're getting a little promotion. You introduce yourself at the beginning so people know who you are, what you're from, and they can check out your shows. They'll put that stuff in the show. I mean, they are promoting the podcasters who submit, which is again part of the beauty of it. So you're there giving your opinion, you're helping build this episode, and then they in turn promote you because you helped. And they're a little behind right now because there's so many submissions, but I mean, hats off to them. I mean, the work they put into it, it's beautiful. Beautiful stuff.
I've heard I heard the Godzilla one because one of the last times that you were in this neck of the woods, we actually listened to some of it, and the editing skills of those guys is just wow. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like everybody's together for the most part. Different people have, different audio setups, so sometimes things sound a little different, but I got to give those guys props. I mean, like you said, there's a lot of submissions, and the end result is just wonderful. Oh on that show. And
to really, and I've even told them, and I know they would leap at the chance to have me edit, but I've considered And if I had some free time, I would probably do it.
Yeah.
Just to see what the experience would be like, because I don't know if I could do it any better than they do. And I understand it's trying to build a narrative based on so many different submissions. So you have to have a through line somewhere. You have to have someone who is guiding the narrative from beginning to end, and then you splice everybody in. And that's got to be daunting, you know? I mean, even just doing videos, I mean, going back to what the Joe Blow stuff that I mentioned last time, there's a difference to that, you know? I have a script, and then I can just kind of pull from, you know, video clips that I think would work here or could work here. But this, I mean, you're having to listen to every submission, or at least I would assume this is how it works. You have to listen to every submission, figure out where that piece from this person goes in, that clip from that person goes in. And sometimes they even have utilized some stuff that I did or said to a degree that I thought was hilarious. And they didn't have to, but to them it would be funny. Yeah. Like every episode here lately with the Batman episodes, I don't even remember where I said it. I don't even remember where I recorded it. But I said, "To be continued." And now every episode has ended with that. And I'm like, okay. But I love it, you know? I don't even remember why I said it.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So definitely check them out. I think in the summertime they're going to be doing like Shark Week stuff. I know Jurassic Park is another one they're getting ready to fire up. I think I'm going to set that one out. I like the movies, but I don't know if I have anything. I haven't really connected with, you know, that. Like, I don't feel like I have strong opinions. I bowed out of, I think it was the Matrix films. They did the Matrix films back in, I think, the end of the year last year. And I didn't have strong feelings about the movie, so I was just like, eh. So you don't have to submit every movie. Yeah. You can just submit to whatever you want. You want to try it out, give it a go for it. I highly recommend it.
Which is awesome. Mm-hmm. Now, before we get into the main show, since you brought up a podcast, I do want to give a shout out to another podcast, and this is a horror podcast for anybody that wants to hear any of that. There is a horror podcast network called Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. This podcast network takes stories from people. You can submit stories. If they like them, they will put them on. They'll give you a shout out. If you're an author, they will even tell people where they can find your work, where they can purchase your work if, you know, people want to. Mm-hmm. Chilling Tales is in season 4 right now. And they tell maybe 2-3 stories. There is a more like premium account that you can pay for their patron. And when you pay for that, you can get ad-free listening and you can get like a few more stories. The show that is under their network, though, that I really want to give a shout out to, it is on season 10 right now.
Oh, wow.
It is called Otis Jiry's Scary Stories Told in the Dark. I absolutely love the sound of Otis Jiry's voice. And I think that's what makes me listen to the show. Mm. But he tells some crazy stories, and they can be about anything you can think of. It's a way for me to unwind. I actually go into work sometimes at 3 in the morning. So when it's still dark outside and I'm at work driving around, I will actually turn it on in the car, and I'll listen to scary stories in the dark, like it says on the ad, you know. But if anybody wants to check that out, we can even put that in the show notes. Yeah. I think it would be worthwhile because it's super cool to listen to the stories and see what people come up with. Because it's just regular people just writing stories for them to narrate. Mm-hmm. Otis Jiry's done one story of his own that he had written and narrated. He's a very talented guy. He's actually done some video game work as well.
Oh, nice.
He's just got a smooth voice, and he's actually what got me into the Chilling Tales part of it. I didn't know that it was a whole network that he was a part of until he actually became a part of it. Mm-hmm. But he is super awesome to listen to. Got a unique voice. He always starts the show with, "This ain't your grandpa," because he a little bit of an older guy, but yeah, I won't get into too many details because it's just one of those shows you have to check out. It's
Sure.
by no means perfect, They have audio issues sometimes, nothing too crazy. But I think the best shows, the best shows aren't perfect. That's
Sure,
the best way I could put it. But yeah, that's one thing I'll give a shout out to.
I think that's a strength of a good podcast, and it's despite your audio quality, it's how much you can always come back. It's the hosts. I mean, that's what you're there for. If they can draw you in, then I think you can forgive audio quality to a point. If the people you're listening to are that charismatic that you're like, man, I love listening to this person. I love listening to what they talk about. So yeah, I would definitely say that's a positive.
Yeah, I would agree with you 100% on that. It's about what you talk about. Sometimes things don't work out. Sometimes audio is an issue. Sometimes video is an issue if you're recording.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it just boils down to subject matter. And I mean, take us for example. We live 6 hours apart, and sometimes we have tech issues, but the show must go on.
That is correct, sir.
And with that, I am going to get into the subject of today's show. So, last show was Remakes from Hell, Part 1, Films That Should Burn, Terrible Remakes. This episode is going to be titled Films from Hell, Part 2, Films That Are Fire. Remakes that are amazing. Because let's be honest, for every couple of bad remakes, there's one decent remake.
Sure.
Now, I know you and I probably agree on a few of these. I'm kind of a remake snob. I will admit that. When it comes to the horror,
I'm with you.
When it comes to the horror genre, especially, other genres I can kind of be a little more forgiving to. But the horror genre, I have a lot of hate for a lot of remakes, and it's just because the films are nostalgic to me.
Sure.
They're coming of age films. Now, I'll name one real quick that I know that we both kind of appreciated, and we can both get into what we like about that, and then we'll just kind of go from there.
Okay.
I really liked the remake of Evil Dead.
Okay.
I thought it was well executed. The original movie was amazing. At the time the effects were, up to par with a lot of the effects that existed, that day. Watching those movies now, they're still good movies. The effects are a little cheesy.
Sure.
But then they come out with this gritty remake. I mean, they decided to make it scary again because, by the time they got to Army of Darkness in the original movies, it had a lot more comedy aspect to it, which is not bad. I love Bruce Campbell. Bruce Campbell being goofy is just amazing.
And that works for him, that's what he's best known for. So I think that lean is best for that actor.
Yeah. But, I remember seeing the first clip of the new the remake of Evil Dead. That was like the first sneak peek that I had seen of it. And it was, the girl's begging her dad not to burn her, she doesn't, you don't have to do this, you don't have to do this. And when he lights that match and you see those yellow eyes and you know she's possessed and she's cussing at him and she's thrashing at him, you just know the movie's going to be insane. And it did not disappoint. And I know I talk about gore sometimes with remakes. Evil Dead's one of those movies you expect to have some gore in.
Mm-hmm.
This movie executed it well.
Oh, yeah.
The story was unique, I think. They found a way to reinvent it, I think.
Yeah.
And they stayed true to the original concept, but they found a way to make it its own thing.
Mm-hmm.
And let's be honest, I'm going to bring it up. In the original movie, the girl gets violated by the tree.
Yep.
In this movie, in the remake, it's like a branch snake type deal, and it slithers on up somewhere it shouldn't be. And even to this day, when I watch that scene, I'm like, oh man,
Yeah.
because it was, whoo-hoo. as far as I'm concerned with it, I think the way that they did the ending and everything was also beautiful. You know, when she digs her way out of the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Spoiler alert for those listening that haven't seen it, go watch the movie. You know, when the new Ash, because that's what she is,
Mm-hmm.
when she crawls out of the ground and the demon comes out that, you know, looks just like her, and, you know, that whole chase ensues, and, you know, she gets really messed up. I think, if I remember correctly, I might be getting my movies mixed up, she's hiding in part of the movie, and the demon's got a, like, machete or something, and she's stabbing it into the wall. If I remember right.
I think that's correct, yeah.
Because it hits her knee,
Mm-hmm.
and she lets out a scream. And to me, that whole scene was just brutal.
Yeah.
And then when she tips the car, and she rips her own hand off, and you just know what's coming. The minute she grabbed that chainsaw, and she goes, "Suck on this," and shoves it into her mouth, I'm just like, this is brilliant. This is brilliant. And, you know, they even, at the end of the movie, at the credits, they set up Bruce Campbell's Ash, actually,
Mm-hmm.
because it was a mid-credit scene. You know, like Marvel does it all the time. Why can't horror movies do it, you know?
Right.
But, you know, seeing him at the end just go, groovy. You couldn't have written it better.
Yeah, yeah.
But, you know, those are the reasons I like that film. I know that you, because we kind of talked about this before we even started recording a little bit.
Sure.
What are your thoughts on the Evil Dead remake?
It was definitely something that I was kind of excited for, but also a little hesitant because, you know, like you said, remakes can be hit or miss. And the fact that I think Sam Raimi was involved in some capacity, producer-wise, kind of gave me a little bit more, what's the word I'm looking for here? I guess I was a bit more
Relieved?
confident. Yeah, relieved, confident that the movie could be, because it would be under his watchful eye. And even, I mean, it was his entire team, wasn't it? It was him, Robert Tapert, and Bruce Campbell all kind of had producer
Yeah,
credits on it.
I was gonna shout him out. I believe that Bruce Campbell. Yeah, I think he even helped because the girl that was going to take over for him, I think she was a little nervous about it, and I think he kind of helped her through some of that.
Yeah. So, I mean, they were there kind of guiding the ship a little bit, but allowing them to do their own thing because the movie, I mean, if you can look at the original and say that's a gory, nasty horror film, because the original did wind up on the video nasties in the UK.
Yes.
This one sets the bar to try and match that.
Oh God, yeah.
If not, you know, succeed it in every possible way, because some of the gore in that, it's just like, oh man, it's brutal. Like you said it yourself, it's brutal stuff. The knife and the tongue bit just crawls my skin every single time.
The scene that talking about dark humor here, when it's a blonde girl, they're in the kitchen, and they actually show the, I don't want to say infection, but that's kind of how this works. It, you know, it possesses the flesh. It starts to work its way up her arm, and there's one of those electric knives.
Yeah,
and she sticks it into her arm, and the guy comes in, and she's standing there with the knife, and her arm is just hanging on by a little bit of skin, and it falls off, and she's like, "I cut it out," or whatever she says. I know it sounds awful. I went to the movie theater to see this.
So did I.
When it came out, and when that scene happened, and she said that, and it fell off, I kind of chuckled. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't know what else to do because it was so gory.
Mm-hmm.
And the other part that really kind of gets me is when the guy walks in, his girlfriend's in the bathroom, and she had broken the top part of the toilet, and she used the porcelain to cut out part of her cheek.
Yeah.
You know, you want to talk about gore? That is just, oh.
Yeah. But what's interesting about it is, as brutal as it is and as uncomfortable as it makes you, it's not one of those that push me to a point where I can't watch this. You know what I mean? it just kind of makes you cringe, where you're just like, ah, man, just makes you grit your teeth. And I feel like that's about the line for my horror that I want, is where I'm just sitting there going, like, I feel the pain, or I can just, and it just makes you intense. You're like, oh man, God, oh God. And you're just kind of gritting and just groaning with them. But it never, I think kind of what you're saying, it's almost like it's so ridiculous, it is kind of funny.
Yeah.
So it teeters a line, but that's exactly what this needed to be, because then that also pays homage to the silliness of the other films.
Yeah.
Because you're finding that way to kind of pay homage with the craziness, but also kind of get a dark humored chuckle out of it.
Well,
so,
and that's my thing with it. We've talked about gore before, and a lot of the time gore in a film is just shock value. And like you said, sometimes you want that gore to pay off at the end. You don't want a ton of gore, and then when something gory does happen. And I think that's where this film did really well. It kind of paced it out. The pacing for the gore was really well done, because it is a very gory film. It's Evil Dead, that's what we expect. It's kind of like going to see a Cronenberg film. You know that it's going to be, crazy. It's going to have a lot of disturbing imagery. But as long as it's executed the right way, it works. Yeah. And I think they did that really well in this. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that they had Sam Raimi there. These filmmakers were like, we want to make this our own, but we don't want to disrespect the legacy that you've created. We want you to sort of... We're driving the ship, but we sort of want you to be the wind that guides the sails a little bit.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes some remakes work.
For sure.
As far as Evil Dead goes. But let's see here. Evil Dead, I think we summed that up pretty well, actually. Oh, yeah. So what would be one that you really enjoy remake-wise?
Well, since you brought up his name, I'm going to have to go to David Cronenberg's The Fly, because it is probably one of my all-time favorite horror films, bar none, because of the way it's crafted.
Yeah.
And Cronenberg, I feel like, can be hit or miss with some people. I'm not a big fan of something like Videodrome. It's okay, but it's a little out there for me, where I can't get into it, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But with The Fly, he took this basic, 1950s concept that could, if you've ever seen the original, it's kind of a ridiculous premise. Man swaps bodies with a fly, and he's got the fly head, and his head's on the fly, and it's ludicrous, but it's the 50s, and that's about as far as they could go with it. But this, they take it to an entirely new level. You use that body horror that Cronenberg is known for, and he really explores that idea of what would happen if you merge the two, and he, Jeff Goldblum becomes a fly. He just slowly, digresses into a fly.
Yeah.
And much like we had just mentioned prior to this, the gore payoff by the end was superb, because we build the entire way there. We see this man who has this idea, and he's just so passionate about it, and he makes one mistake that sets off this chain of events that's going to just destroy him.
Yeah.
And we pretty much go from this kind of love story to this science fiction story, and then the last act is nothing but straight up horror.
Yeah.
When he fully transforms into the fly.
And just to kind of piggyback on what you said, just real quick, just to add something. At that time, Jeff Goldblum was considered a huge sex symbol.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm sure today, by any means, he's still considered a sex symbol. I mean, let's be honest, it's Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah.
But to see him turn from, what he, how he looked at that time, perfection to a lot of people,
Yeah.
into this monster, you actually feel bad for him. You
Oh, yeah.
connect with him. And I know that we've talked about that before. You know, connecting with the characters makes it so much more meaningful, especially
Sure.
with everything that happens to him.
Mhm.
And the love story in it, it's actually not a bad love story.
No.
And you know,
And-
just seeing it fall apart is just, it's brutal to watch, but it
Yeah.
makes you connect to it.
And that's what makes that final scene so heartbreaking.
Yeah.
Is it's if you've never seen it, again, we're spoiling these movies, so get on board.
Watch the
But-
movies.
Yeah, but he's sitting there crawling out of that teleporter after he's pretty much mangled at this point. He's, despite looking like this horrendous monster, he has that last moment of humanity as he takes that shotgun and points it to his head, just end me, end my suffering, because I can't live like this. Just do it. And Gina Davis, despite looking at this grotesque monstrosity, still loves Seth Brundle, and it's heartbreaking for her to have to pull that trigger.
Yeah.
And she just can't bring herself to do it, and I don't know, it's just it's rough. And even just where it ends, you're left sitting with that,
Yeah.
having to watch this tragic love story. But that's the beauty of it. It's a tragic love story, like any good love story, Romeo and Juliet, things like that, tragic. And it's so good. I can watch it so many times and it never gets old.
No, and I will agree with you there. That's one of those movies that I wish I owned it. I don't own it. I'll be the first to admit that. I don't own it. But anytime that it's on TV or anytime that I can find it on a streaming service,
Mhm.
I'll go to it. If I'm not trying to watch a new movie or anything and I see it, I'll be like, I'm going to watch this. It's been a while. It's been a little while since I've watched this. And a shout out to one scene. That movie has one of the most out there birth scenes ever. When she's
Oh,
having the
yeah.
nightmare and she gives birth to the giant maggot.
Yeah.
You're just left like, what the hell just happened? But,
Yeah.
like you said, the 50s movie, it's a good movie.
Mhm.
It's cheesy.
It's a product of its time.
Yeah, at the time that movie come out, a lot of people thought it was, something completely crazy. And I'm sure it freaked out a lot of people, especially when with the spider, when the spider's
Mhm.
crawling and he's like, help me.
That's what I was going to bring up. That's
Yeah.
iconic. Everyone knows
Yeah.
that, or at least you should.
Let's put it this way: The Simpsons did it. The Simpsons, the Simpsons did it on one of their Halloween specials. That's how you know it's iconic.
Mm-hmm.
But Cronenberg made a completely different movie with The Fly that he came out with. But he took a premise that existed already and he made it his own.
He improved upon it, in my opinion.
And I could honestly agree with you there. He made this film his own and he did something that I don't think people were expecting. I think some
No.
people were expecting it to be a cheesy film all over again. But
In fact, fun fact, and you probably know this, but maybe our audience doesn't. One of the producers, in fact, the main producer of this film, was Mel Brooks.
that is true, yeah.
But he left his name off of it because he didn't want people to think, oh, well, Mel Brooks is producing. This is going to be a comedy.
Yeah.
He knew what his name meant to so many people and what that meant. But he had, his film company, Brooks Films, that he wanted to branch out. He wanted to do different things. Now, this wasn't the first time he'd done something like this. Like, I think one of the very first films he ever produced that was not a comedy was The Elephant Man, which is another great film, not a horror film, but it's a great character
Yes.
study, true story. And that he didn't want his name associated with it because he didn't want people to think it's a joke, it's a comedy, ha ha ha. And same with this. He wanted to produce it. He had a lot of faith in Cronenberg and everything that they were doing, but he didn't want his name associated with it. So if you see Brooks Films, it's Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
And so he's responsible for helping that get off the ground, and I applaud him for it.
I will agree with you there. That's just, I could talk about that movie a lot, actually.
Yeah.
I remember a lot of late nights even when I was a kid, just sitting there watching it.
Shout out to Jeff Goldblum and his stellar performance where he's doing the fly twitches.
Yeah.
It's a subtlety, but it makes so much sense. You know,
well, and sometimes it is the subtle things. I'll give a shout out to Kane Hodder. Several people have played Jason Voorhees.
Mm-hmm.
Kane Hodder did some iconic little things that made his version of Jason what it is today. He flared his shoulders a lot when Jason was frustrated. He did the quick turns when Jason was, out for the kill. Subtle things that he did as that character, you could pick him out of a lineup of Jasons because of the way that he moves, the way that he acts, the subtle things that he does. That makes the performance. And, shout out to all of the actors in these remakes we're going to be talking about, because let's be honest, that is the biggest part of it. A lot of remakes, it feels like the people in them don't want to be in them.
Yeah.
And that kills a film. You can tell when somebody doesn't want to be there, and it kills it. Again, Rooney Mara as Nancy. Killed it for me. Killed it.
It's like, if I have to.
Exactly. But, God, yeah. The Fly, Evil Dead, 2 great remakes.
Mm. How it should be done. Really strong cases on how it should be done.
Now, I will talk about one real quick. This is one I know you haven't seen yet, so I'm not going to get too far into it. I am going to talk about it a little bit. I'm not going to try to spoil it for you.
Okay.
The remake of Candyman. Fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
They recreated the story of Candyman, which was bound to happen. But you had such an iconic character in Candyman. Tony Todd played Candyman in 3 films. Did a fantastic job. When people think of Tony Todd, they instantly think of Candyman. And he's getting up there a little bit. He's in his 60s now.
Mm-hmm.
He's still a good-looking guy. He could probably still play Candyman constantly if he wanted to.
Sure.
But they recast the role of Candyman. They told a different story with Candyman in this new film. But they did something that paid homage to the original films. And they found a way to connect the new Candyman all the way down to the original.
Nice.
The performances were fantastic. They changed some of the rules. They changed things around. I think in the original Candyman, I think you said Candyman 3 times in the mirror, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
In the new one, I think it's 5 times. So,
okay.
Subtle change. They have a different actor, obviously, playing Candyman. And his story is a lot different. He was wrongfully killed because they thought he was putting razor blades or poison or something, it's been a minute, into candy that he was handing out to kids.
All right.
Kind of like that idea, though, because it kind of gives the whole Candyman name a little bit more meaning. But, like I said, they found a way to put things in perspective and give the original Candyman the credit that he deserves. And to me, that's part of a remake perfection. When you sort of pay tribute, you can make it your own, and if it works, brilliant. But when you have such iconic characters, you have to pay some kind of homage to those characters. And I think that's what made Candyman at least work for me. You're not always going to make everybody happy. But for me, it works because they pay tribute to Tony Todd's incarnation of Candyman.
Mm-hmm.
I won't say too much more because I don't want to spoil it for you, because I know you still need to watch it. But that is one that I will say. There is another movie I will say real quick that I like as a remake. I don't know where you stand on this because this is one of your favorite franchises. I actually enjoyed the Texas Chainsaw remake, not the one that's on Netflix. I
which is a
enjoyed.
sequel.
Yes,
Technically.
I enjoyed the one with Jessica Biel in it.
Mm-hmm.
I think it came out in like 2003 or
2003,
something.
yeah. Sounds right.
Um, a lot of people didn't like it. I thought that they executed it rather well. They had the family in it, which I thought was wonderful. To me, Leatherface doesn't work without the family.
No, absolutely not.
And I always struggle on his name. You know who I'm talking about, Mr. Army Man.
Oh, Arlie Ermy.
Thank you. I love him as an actor, and him being the twisted, him killing the sheriff and becoming the twisted sheriff. Finger parentheses here. It just worked for me.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed it. They told their story and everything, and they have the love story between Jessica Biel's character and everything. But it just worked for me. I thought it was good for what it was. Nothing's going to live up to the original.
No.
Not with that franchise. Leatherface is this big hulking killer. I think it's harder for killers that don't talk. I know that sounds weird, but characters that don't communicate, I think it's hard to do a remake of them, because there's a certain kind of iconicness to it. But it's not because of necessarily the character themselves. It's the atmosphere that is created in those original films. That is really hard to recreate.
Yeah.
But what is your stance on that Texas Chainsaw Massacre? I know that's one of your favorite franchises, so
Sure.
I get your opinion on it.
It's definitely not one of the worst films. I don't consider it a bad remake by any means. I would never hold it above the original or say that, oh man, they just knocked it out of the park. This is so much better than what Tobe Hooper did. Never, ever, ever. It's never going to happen. And I applaud them for what they did. They were trying to take it back to its roots. They were trying to retell this tale, but with its own spin. I think at first it bugged me that they had changed the family name. But at the same time, I kind of respected it, that they were trying to do their own thing. They were trying to be different. So it doesn't have the Sawyer stigma. They're just like, okay, now we can just be an entirely new family. We have our own Leatherface, but we can do... People are not going to expect the cook or the hitchhiker. They're seeing different people within this family. And that actually works to its benefit. It's not like the name was so iconic that you just had to have it. It's not like Voorhees or Myers or Kruger. No one really knows Leatherface's family name.
Yeah.
Even though it's built right in Sawyer. Anyway.
Yeah.
But no, I mean, it's solid for what it did. I mean, they were trying to add the gore, which we really didn't have in a lot, especially in the first one.
Yeah.
Despite what you may think, there was no gore. There really wasn't at all.
No. And to be honest, the budget at the time kind of limited them, because I think he paid for most of the original film using credit cards.
Mm-hmm.
If I remember right. He racked up quite a bit of debt, and a lot of the actors didn't even get paid for it.
Yeah.
And I think the narrator, if I remember right, he I don't know if this is just a rumor, but I've read it at a few different sources. The original narrator of Texas Chainsaw Massacre got paid with a joint.
That is actually accurate, if I'm not mistaken. That was John Larroquette.
Yes.
If you don't know his name, or if you don't know who he is, I grew up with him on a television show that is actually going to get a revival here soon, so maybe all of you who are unfamiliar with it might get to know him. It's called Night Court. It was an NBC sitcom that ran from like the early 80s to like barely into the 90s, I think. And it was just a ludicrous show, but that's where I really knew him from. And I didn't know at the time, when I very first watched Texas Chainsaw Massacre, that was his voice. And then when I learned that was John Larroquette, I was like, holy shit, Dan Fielding from Night Court? No kidding. But, I mean, he had really nothing going on at the time. He was kind of like a, bit player here and there. He hadn't really blown up. And, yeah, they just said, here you go. Here's a joint. There you go. Thank you. but he's got such a beautiful baritone. He just sells it. And they utilized him again in the remake, or not remake, the piece of shit on Netflix.
We'll call it a soft remake, sort of. It's a remake sequel. It's a requel, like you said.
It's one of those garbage ass things that they do nowadays. But I almost, if I'm not mistaken, and it's been a while since I've seen it, but I'm almost positive of this, he did the end narration of this film's prequel. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning.
Which, that wasn't a bad film either.
No, I mean, I think we can give these films pass because they understand what the original films were. They try to put their own spin on it, but they don't do anything outlandish to take it too far removed from what we are familiar with. Like you said, they utilize the family element, which is what you need. But they didn't go with the family element like in The Next Generation where they... Oh, God. Why didn't we talk about that one? We're talking about remakes. We're not talking about sequels. But yeah, the whole... I don't even know what the hell was going on in that movie. And to some degree, I mean, if we want to talk about a movie that's passable, I guess I would kind of lump this in with that one, is Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3, aptly named Leatherface, which was trying to continue, but then also kind of did the soft reboot thing where it was, he had a new family. But again, they understood the importance of the family within the context of Leatherface. And that's what these people also understood. You need that family element, and then he is just the weapon for the family.
Yeah. And I think that's where the Netflix film really failed. Like we talked about, and I won't touch too much on this, but Leatherface is iconic, but if you take the family away, it almost makes him feel like a Jason knockoff.
Yeah, and not in a good way.
No, and that's where the problem is. Truth be told, if I remember correctly, the first one out of all the slashers is actually Leatherface.
Mm-hmm.
It was Leatherface.
Granddaddy.
Yep, it was Leatherface, then Michael Myers, then Jason, and then Freddy.
Mm-hmm.
And, he's the Mac Daddy. He's the original,
That's right.
Give him the proper respect that he deserves.
And it's such a shame that you don't have filmmakers out there who understand the source material. And they continue to make these half-assed movies that just do not live up to what this should be. And for whatever reason, the ones that have always failed, in my opinion, are the ones that try to adhere to the original story. Like they're trying to hang on to that thread as if it matters in some way. With the remakes, they said, all right, well, we're going to go back to 1973, but we're going to tell the story differently. And then really try to work that out. And it was a smart play. They could have tried to modernize it, but at that point, how does that work? And I would still love to, I still think there's an opportunity for a proper modern remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but I feel like it needs to be thought out. But you have to have a family. You have to have an understanding of the material to make it work. And I think that's why I respect them going back to the 70s, because then you take away cell phones, you take away items that could be helpful in the situation versus just being abandoned on a dirt road in Texas. At that time,
I would, and maybe this might not sound perfect. Maybe change location just a little bit for a Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I think it would be. I think it would be cool to do it somewhere still hot, but more like I could see it being done in like a swamp type area. Where there's not cell phone reception, stuff like that. Change the location maybe up a little bit. Still have the family. And put Leatherface in a setting like that. I think that would be kind of interesting to see. I think it would be dangerous a little bit because you would be taking them out of the location that everybody knows them in.
Yeah.
But I don't know, something about seeing Leatherface in a swamp and, Leatherface is on one side of you and there's alligators in the other side of the swamp where you're going to try to escape.
Yeah.
To me, that might be an interesting concept. I don't know how well that would play out, but
Sure.
no, I don't mind the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. I wish that they would have maybe explored it a little bit more. I think they kind of, the way that they ended the remake, though, that they did, when she jumps out of the locker and she takes the meat cleaver to him, she cuts one of his arms off.
Yeah.
That would have been interesting to see maybe in a sequel, how Leatherface would still be able to do everything with one arm. I mean, I don't know how that would have played out. But yeah, I'll agree with you there. It's not a bad remake. It's not anything, I'm going to stand on the rooftop and scream my love to, but it's not a bad one. I'll give it its props. Another remake. I know you and I kind of feel a little differently on the sequel that they did to the remake. But let's talk about Halloween that came out in 2018.
Okay.
Because that paid a lot of homage to the original.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it's not so much a remake as it's a what-if story.
Yeah.
That's what I consider it. I consider it a what-if story because you can still go and watch all the original movies and love them for what they are. But then if you ask yourself the question, what would have happened if Michael got arrested that night and they actually caught him and everything? Well, now you've got your answer.
Yeah.
And they executed it beautifully. I think they told Laurie's story really well. They showed her struggle with everything that happened to her that night.
Mm-hmm.
And that adds that depth. Again, you're connecting to the character because of the depth that they add. They brought back Nick Castle, the original Michael Myers, which, fun fact, I'm sure you know this, some of the listeners might not know this. In the original Halloween, he was not really known as Michael through a lot of the script. Whenever they had him written into the script, he was the Shape. Nick Castle was the original Shape. Nick Castle's in his 70s now. He has had a cameo in every single movie as Michael. I think in Halloween Kills, he had a cameo, but I don't think it made it to the film. I think it was a deleted scene, if I remember correctly.
Yes. I mean, he was there from the side, like when toward the end where they took his mask off, that was him when you saw the profile of the head. Mm-hmm. But beyond that, there was even, I don't know if you remember this or not, but at the beginning of the film, after the news had broke that he had escaped, they showed the TV off in the background. They showed one of the escaped inmates, and then they showed him, but the moment they cut to his face, the TV went out of focus, so you didn't quite see his face, but you could tell it was Nick Castle's profile. So it was like, oh, that's kind of neat. So we're not quite showing his face, but we are.
And that's another thing that worked with that film. In my opinion, they stayed true to Nick Castle's version of Michael Myers. Mm-hmm. A fun fact, they actually have him do recording now. They have his breathing. Huh. Instead of the actor that's playing Michael now, they have Nick Castle breathing. So when you hear Michael Myers breathing, which in Halloween Kills, there's a scene at the park where someone is hiding from Michael. And you can hear his breathing really heavy, like you could in some of the original films. That's all Nick Castle. That's all the original. Nice. It's those subtle things like that, though, that really add to it. And I really appreciated the 2018 film. I thought it was well executed. I thought it told a good story. It really showed the struggle of what surviving that did to Laurie and to her family, which makes you connect on an emotional level. Halloween Kills, I kind of have a love-hate thing for. I thought it was a good movie. I did. Were there things that I thought they could have done a little differently? Yes. I got a little tired of the evil dies tonight being shouted everywhere. I feel like some of the characters made really stupid decisions. Even for a horror movie, I know people make stupid decisions, but even for a horror movie, I think some people made some stupid decisions. My wife kind of had a complaint. She's not a big horror movie fan, which we're going to have a whole podcast about that. But she kind of looked at me and she said, I know that Michael Myers is a killer, but he seemed a little excessive in this film with his killing. And I kind of thought about that, and I was like, there's a few moments where it's like, Michael, they're dead. I know you're angry and you're a psychopath, but did you really have to put all of the knives in that guy's back?
Yeah.
But, to me, I let that stuff go because I'm just like, it is what it is. They want a little bit of that shock value with Michael, and let's be honest, Michael's got to be extra violent because these films are ignoring all of the other films where he's killed all these people. He's got some catching up to do. But what are your thoughts on the Halloween remake?
I really enjoyed it as well. I thought bringing kind of a fresh perspective to it was interesting. It wasn't something I thought about when I heard when they were going to remake it and they said, oh yeah, Jamie Lee Curtis is back. I was like, well, wait a minute, what? How could she be back? Are we just creating a new timeline? Obviously we are. I mean, Halloween's turned into a choose your own adventure book, honestly. If you want to go down this rabbit hole, you want to go down that rabbit hole, you can do whatever you want. You've got plenty of options. But I honestly feel like the approach they took with her here, it seems to work a little bit better.
Yeah.
Like the sister angle was interesting, but I also know that Carpenter regretted that decision after, because in the moment it just seemed like, why would it be coming after this girl again? Well, sister, sure, that works. So I understand where his writing mind could have been at that point. You're trying to connect dots. Why would he still continue? I honestly would have just said, maybe it felt like unfinished business. And he was like, nope, this one got away. By God, I'm going to go finish her off.
Yeah.
But that's just me.
That adds a scary factor to it, too.
Yeah. Like he feels like he missed one, like he's a hunter. And he was like, damn it, I want to kill this one.
Yes.
She got away. So, but it adds a wrinkle to it that I don't feel like we've seen in a horror film, or at least a horror sequel, where we see a survivor having trauma. Because even in other films where they, someone has survived, we haven't really explored that. Yeah. There might be a touch. It was like, oh yeah, it was rough. Oh, whatever. But it's almost like it's brushed away. Here we really get to see like deep inside, like what would something like this do to someone? Like how would that affect someone? And to say that she just goes into hiding and she's turned into this survivalist, yeah, why wouldn't you do that? If you felt like this person was coming back for you, again, piggybacking off of part 2, if she had not been his sister and she thought this person was coming back yet again, like he already came for her once, then came for her a second time, holy shit, I would be on my, I'd be like, hey, yeah, I'm not coming out. As long as this dude's alive, no, he's going to keep coming for me because I was the one that got away. So it's almost like they looked at that angle and tried to reposition how they told that story.
Yeah.
And it really works. And it's a great character study about Laurie. I don't feel like, Michael's just there as kind of obviously the shark in the water, if you will, just doing his thing, and it works. As far as kills goes, I really thought that was also a very interesting study. I could see where you're talking about the stupid decisions. I'm almost positive there were a few times I was like, why won't you just... I think there was a scene toward the end. It was like, I'm going to go inside. You two wait here. And I was like, you think that's a good idea? I could go with you and kind of have your back.
And backup wasn't that far behind in that.
Yeah,
which was
just chill out, dude.
Yeah, like, come on now.
Just ease up. So yeah, I get those decisions, but I also like the character study they did on the town, where it's what would something like this do to a small town like Haddonfield. Now they've touched on it, like in Halloween 4, I guess would be the closest we've really gotten to something similar to this, where the town's like, oh, this son of a bitch is coming back. We ain't letting him, take over Haddonfield this time. So it's that, but almost really extreme. Like they've amped it up a lot to where these people are just like, no, we've had it. This stigma has been all over this town because this one son of a bitch, he's come back to town. We're going to finish him off. Come hell or high water, and we're going to do it. And then the tragic scene with the other inmate that escaped in Haddonfield Hospital, I felt like that was a very well-executed scene because that shows what that kind of mentality can lead to.
Yes.
This mistake where people are just like, oh, that's him. And they're not thinking. And even as people are just like, this is not him, calm down. There's no, tempering the mob.
Yeah.
So something tragic happens because of it. And I felt like that was a great scene that they added in to kind of amplify what these people are doing and kind of showing sometimes I understand where you're coming from, but you got to take it down a notch because bad things will happen. And this was to someone, he may have been in the institute, but he didn't deserve that.
No.
And it could have been somebody else. Maybe they got caught in the crossfire. And then, of course, we saw what happened to everybody at the end, which I guess I should have seen coming.
Yeah, and the ending kind of threw me a little. Everybody in town attacking him, and he gets up, and to me it felt like one of those 80s montages where the hero is getting up, and at the last minute he's defeating all the enemies, and there was a little bit of a disconnect for me there at that part. But other than that, and the stupid decisions, I thought it was a well-executed film. I can't wait for the next one. I can't wait to see what they do to close out this chapter of things. Because it's going to be interesting.
I've heard they showed a little bit of footage at CinemaCon. From what I heard, it was a tussle between Michael and Laurie.
Yes.
So I don't know more than that. That's just the bits that I've heard.
I can tell you what I've read about it, if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah.
From what my understanding was in the scene opens with like a montage of killings, and Laurie's talking about Michael. It shows her in a kitchen, sort of hiding from him. He gets a hold of her. He smacks her head off of something. She stabs him in the hand, and when she stabs him in the hand, he throws her into a wall. I'm a little fuzzy on what happens in between all this, but I know that it closes out with Michael laying across the kitchen table, and Laurie is standing over him with a butcher knife.
Okay.
So, should be interesting to see what happens with this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering if they're going to go off an angle that the only person who can kill Michael is Laurie. If it was a perfect world and they wanted to close it out, Laurie and Michael would just kill each other.
Yeah.
I don't, I'm not saying that I want that to happen. I don't know. It depends on how they execute it. These films have shown that studios can take the time to make a film nostalgic. They can show the grittier side of human nature, of how people are, and turn it into something unique. And I think that's where Halloween works. I will give a shout out to Halloween on one other thing too, especially Halloween Kills. They did something that I think is amazing. For those of you listening that don't know, the actor who plays Dr. Loomis, the original actor, Donald Pleasance, has unfortunately been deceased since the 1990s, I believe, or the early 2000s.
Right after Halloween 6, wasn't it?
Yes, he had
He passed before that got released.
He had open heart surgery, I believe. He died from complications.
Mm-hmm.
They brought him back. The films in Halloween, the scenes in Halloween Kills that he is in, a lot of people thought that was made up of deleted scenes and things like that. Wasn't even that. It wasn't that. It wasn't CGI. they found an actor who looks sort of similar to him. They put some prosthetics on that actor, and they had a voice actor who did recordings for the 2018 Halloween. Those recordings that you hear on tape are not Donald Pleasance either. They're an actor that sounds like him. They're a voice actor. They did a phenomenal job at bringing Donald Pleasance back from the dead to play in this film by using practical effects and voice acting. And to me, as you know, I'm a huge Nightmare on Elm Street fan. I'll say that every episode if I have to, so people know. To me, I instantly thought, well, you know, Robert Englund's familiar with voice acting. And people want to see him be Freddy one more time.
Mm-hmm.
What if they found an actor that they could slap some makeup on and have Robert Englund do some voice acting? You know, they've superimposed actors' heads on other actors' bodies, but this would be a more cost-effective way of doing it.
Yeah.
You could have Robert Englund, you know, physically be Freddy for a little bit of a movie, but you could have an actor do the more physically demanding things and have Robert Englund voice act. Like, I really thought about that when I saw that, because the way they executed that was so well done. And to me, just like Leatherface's family is important to the story, the two most important things in a Michael Myers film to me is Laurie and Dr. Loomis. Dr. Loomis has always been iconic. I love Donald Pleasance as an actor. I mean,
Yeah.
even when he was the villain in the Bond movies, I loved him. You know, he's got a great voice. His look. To watch him in the movies, even the original Halloweens, you know, if anybody listening has not seen the original Halloween films, watch all of them. Even Season of the Witch. Michael Myers isn't even in it, but watch it. Just watch them all. But I think that's where Halloween really works for me, is they took the time to bring back characters that we all, you know, absolutely love. And they stayed true to the original story. And I think that's what makes a remake or a reimagining, reboot, requel, whatever you want to call it. That is what makes it work, at least in my eyes.
I could agree. I think that's where Rob Zombie's version kind of falter, is because he didn't quite stay true to every character. He was trying to do something different, which I respect, but it lost the essence of those characters, which is why they felt foreign and they didn't feel right. Like we said before, I think on a previous episode, Michael feels like he doesn't feel like the boogeyman.
Yeah.
Dr. Loomis turns into a media crazed, you know, Dr. Phil type, and it's just like, but that's not Dr. Loomis, you know? It's not that character. So it just feels wrong.
Which, a shout out to, you know, for Rob Zombie's Halloween films, there are things about those films that I do like, I'll admit. I think the physicality of his version of Michael Myers is, it's terrifying.
Yeah.
His Michael is extremely brutal. Even more so than the Michael that we all know. And I'll give him props there, because that is what made his Michael Myers scary to me. How just insanely brutal he was. You know, the original Michael, you know he's a physical force, because he's just, even when he moves slow, you know, I mean, he stabs somebody in the back and picks them up with a knife.
Yeah.
And does it just so slowly and just so, you know, Rob Zombie's Michael, he does have the slow movements, but when he starts killing and he goes ham on somebody, he's just, there's this motion to it that I think just shows this built up rage in there. And I'll give him props for that. And yes, I didn't particularly care for his version of Dr. Loomis, but I do have a deep love and respect for Malcolm McDowell, who played Dr. Loomis. I think he is a fantastic actor.
Mm-hmm.
Given what he had to do in the film, I think he did a decent job executing the character. I just don't think the character was written the best, personally.
Right.
Another shout out to Malcolm McDowell. He's in one of my favorite horror movies of all time. It's a slow-paced film. I wouldn't necessarily consider it fully horror, but A Clockwork Orange.
Mm-hmm.
That is from the 70s, if I remember correctly. But another one of those films, 1971. I looked it up. He's also in Caligula. And he's in a film by Rob Zombie called 31. I don't know if you've ever seen 31.
It's one of those that I've always meant to watch, and I guess it was never readily available somewhere. I know it is now, but it just kind of has slipped by me, and I just need to come back around and watch it.
It throws me off. This is completely random, but I have to say this. It throws me off because one of the killers in 31, because 31 is a game to these people. They make bets on who is going to succeed at killing all these people. They put them into this basically like maze, and they have these killers come and try to take them out. One of the killers, which I just have to say, is the voice actress that did Tommy Pickles' voice in Rugrats.
That's right, yeah.
So when she talks in the film, you can hear Tommy Pickles a little bit. And you're hearing it and you're going, Tommy Pickles is a sociopath. Okay. And it just, it took away for me just because, you know, who doesn't know who Tommy Pickles is from Rugrats? Everybody knows.
Right.
So hearing it just really throws you off. But yeah, you know, I think Rob Zombie was trying to do something unique.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the second film hit the mark for me. The first film, I can say that there was a lot of stuff about it that I did enjoy for what it was. The second film, there was really just a disconnect for me. You know, him seeing his dead mom and all this other stuff just kind of threw me off. And I know in the original Halloween films, they kind of got into the occult a little bit. They sort of talked about how, you know, Michael was more than just a person who was, you know, crazy. He was, I can't remember exactly what it was. I think it had something to do with the pagan religion, maybe. Or
Druids.
Druids, thank you. But, you know, he had a tattoo symbol on his arm, and there was a man that kept finding him in one of the original movies. And it just sort of added up to a more supernatural thing.
Right.
But it worked for what it was at the time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I will give the 2018 remake and this latest remake, I'll give them props where they deserve props.
Mm-hmm.
They succeeded, I think, in staying true to the source material while at the same time giving us something new. Now,
right.
There is another thing that I kind of have to talk about just a little bit. It is a sequel, but every time a movie comes out based off of these films now, I always consider it sort of a remake in its own right. Scream, the latest Scream movie. It is a sequel, but at the same time, when they came out with it, they even said it was sort of a soft reboot of the series.
Yeah.
You know, you brought back your original three. You know, you came up with some new kills. Scream is a movie that is self-aware. It knows what it is. It knows that it is a movie. They follow the tropes. They follow the rules. They change the rules. With the reboots and everything, they change the rules again. Nothing like that existed at the time when Scream first came out. And they still try to reinvent it today. Every time they do a new movie, they're trying to reinvent it. They're keeping up with where films are, and that works for them. The biggest spot where I will give the new Scream movie props, which again, you and I have talked about this before, they finally had the nerve to kill off one of the main characters that has survived through everything.
Yeah.
And I think they needed to do that.
That was a prerequisite when I had rewatched the original 4 before watching the new one, is I said, someone has to die. I mean, I know these are fan favorites, but someone's got to go.
Yeah.
If you're going to bring them all back, one or all have to go. And I hate to say that, but it's true.
Yeah.
At some point, I mean, your luck's going to run out. And I personally would have offed Sydney, but that's just me. But at the same time, if you want to give her, I don't think she needs to come back.
Yeah.
I know that they were talking to her about coming back for 6. I don't know if she's committed yet, but I feel like this was your opportunity to let them go, let them pass the baton, which I felt like they did, and then allow those characters to move on with their lives and be done. Which, I mean, it seems like Sydney definitely had. Gail wasn't even in Woodsboro anymore. Neither of them were. So they've moved on.
Yeah.
They have their own lives. Let their story be done.
Yeah.
I really don't feel like they need to bring him back yet. I've heard Courtney Cox has already signed on. And it just doesn't... It feels like the wrong move.
Yeah. And truthfully, it's an opportunity, You look at even Nightmare on Elm Street. Heather Langenkamp was the original final girl for that film series. And then Nancy meets her demise. And then we work our way all the way down to Lisa Wilcox as our final girl. Alice. They went through final girls in that film. And Scream could have an opportunity there. It would be hilarious to hear Ghostface on the phone with someone going, looks like we've got a new final girl. You could start a whole new film series with that. And the killer could even poke fun at the new final girl, saying that she's not the original.
Mm-hmm.
You could use that. That could be a whole new concept that they could actually use. And I think it would work well, especially for a film like Scream. Because they talk about that. Is it the second one? I believe I'm terrible with remembering movie character names, so forgive me. Mr. Movie Guy, that's what I'll call him.
Randy.
Randy, thank you. When they're at the college, and he's on the phone with the killer, and the killer's going, "You're never going to be the main character. You're never going to get the girl." It's cheesy a little bit, but it works because it's playing into the whole, we're treating this like it's all a movie.
Yeah.
They could do that and it would work. Either kill off Sid or let Sid have her happily ever after.
And I think the fact that she has a family now, you need to let her have her happily ever after. Just let her move on.
Yeah.
Crying out loud.
I either do that or like I had kind of talked about with you before, and I think we actually talked about it on one of the podcasts. I've read where somebody thought it would be crazy if they had an ultimate twist where somehow Sid ended up being the killer. I don't know how they would write that to make it work, but if they wrote something beautiful and made it work, more power to them.
Yeah. Like, I genuinely thought Gail Weathers should have been the killer in part 3, as if she orchestrated this whole thing for book sales.
Now, see, that would be wonderful.
That, to me, would have made a hell of a lot more sense, tying it back to the original and giving you this full circle with a character that you've been there with, as opposed to introducing a killer who shouldn't have been your killer and is like, who the hell are you? You haven't been here. It's like, nah, but I've been pulling the strings the entire time. It's like, yeah, but we don't know you.
Well, and
this is it didn't pay off.
As funny as it sounds, they could have stole an idea from Scary Movie. In the first Scary Movie, the reporter was actually teamed up with the killer.
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily have to be Gail that's the killer. She could have someone doing all the killing for her and be paying them off, or, you know, maybe somebody wants to get even with Sid and she finally has had enough and she wants that success. She wants to be the sole survivor.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's so many different concepts they could come up with.
Yeah.
But, you know, for what the Scream soft reboot was, as I'll call it, I thought they did decent with it.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of people, and I the more I watch it, the more I start to notice the truth in it. The original 3 weren't going to come back since Wes had passed away, because he directed Scream 4, and that's why they came back for Scream 4. They all had a deep love and respect for Wes Craven. These new guys that directed it, and I think they even were responsible for some of the writing, they wanted to make a film that they thought Wes Craven would have directed.
Yeah.
And the original 3, they felt strongly enough that it was something that Wes Craven would have been happy with, and that's why they came back. So, you know, I respect them for that, and seeing the film a few more times, I could see it being something that, you know, Wes Craven would have been happy with.
Sure.
You know, one of the last films that he did was called My Soul to Take. That movie gets a lot of hate, but I honestly really enjoyed it. I don't know if you've seen it. All these kids are born at the same time on the night that this killer died. And the story goes that his soul is in one of them, and they are a killer. And every time one of the kids dies, there's this one kid that he tends to get tendencies of theirs. He starts acting like these kids.
Mm.
And to me, it kind of reminded me of, Nightmare on Elm Street. Dream Master.
Yeah.
Freddy was claiming their souls, but Alice was getting their power. And it was like a real life version of that. It wasn't in the dream world, it was real life.
Mm.
And that's what it made me think of. You know, that's one of those movies, if you get the chance to check it out, I would maybe check it out. It's not for everybody, but I think you would probably enjoy it. But as far as remakes go, are there any other ones you can think of off the top of your head that you thoroughly enjoyed? I'm checked out.
All right. Well,
on mine.
There's at least one more that I wanted to bring up before we wrap it up, because I feel like it's a remake I thoroughly enjoy, but I don't ever hear a lot of people talk about it. And I've never understood why. I don't know if it's just gone unnoticed, or maybe the original far surpasses it in so many ways that people are like, nah, it won't. It's no reason to check it out. And funny enough, I brought this movie up earlier. Night of the Living Dead, directed by Tom Savini. This was, I think, made in 1990, I think is when it released. It was distributed with an actual company behind it. I think Columbia Pictures was the company studio behind it. They remade this movie to try and to get the name Night of the Living Dead back into copyright. So they owned the name. And that was kind of the reason behind it, which kind of feels like an empty reason to do a movie. But obviously, as we mentioned prior, Night of the Living Dead had gone into public domains, and they kind of wanted to get something back, since they didn't make a dime off of this. And Romero tapped Tom Savini to direct it, which, I mean, he had done plenty of effects work, but he hadn't really done a lot of directing. I think he had done a little before this, but this would have been like his big moment. Even though he didn't feel like he was the man to do it, he did it anyway. But I think he did a fantastic job with the material. I mean, they didn't really change a whole lot as far as the way the story is told. It's modernized, obviously. It's not set in the same time period. It's current day. Every actor who's playing their respective characters from the story, the original story, they do a phenomenal job. You got Tony Todd. We mentioned him. I mean, he's playing the main character. I mean, dude knocks it out of the park. I think this is one of the first. I think Candyman, I may have seen him in first, and then when I saw him in that, I was like, oh yeah, that guy. But I mean, he's phenomenal. You can't go wrong with Tony Todd.
No, not at all.
Tom Towles, oh my God, dude. I mean, if you ever wanted to hate a man so bad, like I love the man. I've met the man. He is a great person, or he was anyway. He's passed, but in that movie, he makes me hate him so bad because he plays such an asshole, but he does it so well, and that's what that guy needed to be, because in those moments you're going to find that person who's just unwilling to flinch. They think they know everything, their way is right and everyone else's way is wrong, and it adds to the dichotomy of all these people together. Everyone has their own, well, we should do this, we should do that, no, we're not going to do that, we're not going to do that, and it just, the conflict of clashing personalities. So, and he nails it so well. And then Patricia Tallman, whose character's name, Barbara. They're coming to get you, Barbara. Should have remembered. No, the way they take her character in this iteration, I feel like is more appropriate. Her being catatonic pretty much in the original film for most of the damn movie, she became kind of a pest to me, you know? I mean, that's one of the things I dislike so much about the original film, as classic as it is. She's just, and she does it beautifully. You know, she owns the role. Judith O'Dea in that film, she does it great. So I'm not knocking her for that, but I just didn't feel like it added anything. But here with Patricia Tallman playing that character, she starts off with it as that same kind of mousy character, you know, like you think she's going to be that same person, and you watch her evolve. Like she goes from, I don't know what to do, I'm panicking, I'm just trying to survive, and as opposed to sinking into some catatonic state to where she can't function, she decides, I'm going to own up, and I'm going to survive. I'm going to be a survivor, and she does. And I feel like it was a more appropriate choice for this film. It kind of gives it its own unique twist, and she owns the role, you know. And I feel like it's a remake that goes wholly unnoticed because no one talks about it. But I think it's a great remake.
And to be honest, I hadn't thought about that until you just mentioned it. So I will agree with you. It goes a little unnoticed. I do remember watching that. I honestly think the first time I watched it, it aired like on like HBO or one of those channels, and I sat there and I watched it and actually really enjoyed it. I was like, wait a minute, this is a remake of that one movie.
Yeah. It's solid. Like I said, I just do not understand why it doesn't get more recognition. It follows the same. It doesn't really try to reinvent the wheel, but it makes enough changes to where it's appropriate for this movie, and it works to the strengths of that. And again, with the cast that you've got, I mean, you'll see familiar faces that you know. They own every single scene that they're in. I mean, you can't go wrong with it. I highly recommend it if you've never seen it. It's got to be out there. I haven't looked to see where it's at, but it's got to be on.
Oh, I'm sure it's somewhere.
Some streaming site somewhere. And if not, you probably buy it digital. You probably find it on DVD maybe, or Blu-ray, I would hope. I think I've got it on DVD if I'm not mistaken.
I wouldn't think that it would be too hard to find. It might even be on Amazon Prime or something.
Yeah, definitely check it out. It's Tony Todd alone.
Right, you know, makes it worth it.
Yeah, because I mean, Dwayne Jones was phenomenal in the original, but Tony Todd equals that. You know, he brought his game and knocked it out of the park.
We've definitely given people, I think, a lot to think about.
For sure.
Now, before we do close out, and obviously I will, I'll have you tell people where they can find us at. You make it so seamless.
Oh, do I?
I will say before we get into that, though, if there are any remakes or reboots that we didn't mention, just like on the last show, we mentioned that, you know, if people want to tell us what remakes they absolutely hate, please let us know on our Twitter page. Same thing here. If you guys have remakes, reboots that you really enjoyed that we didn't mention, or you have anything you'd like to say about the ones that we did mention, please reach out to us. It's the Horror Ramblings Podcast. You can reach out to us on our Twitter. It's very easy to find. You know, let us know what you guys think. Let us know if there was something that we didn't touch on. because there might be something that we didn't know,
Mm-hmm.
something that we might have missed. There might have been remakes and reboots that we missed. You know, we want to know what you guys think. We want to know what you enjoyed hearing us talk about. Maybe there was something that you didn't know that we covered, or vice versa. But reach out to us. Get on Twitter. Find us. Let us know what you guys think. Other than that, I'll let Steven tell you guys where you can find us at, and we'll go from there, guys.
Well, like you said, you can find us on Twitter at Horror Ramblings, and maybe we can work out a hashtag for all these remakes. Hashtag bad remake, hashtag solid remake. Because we don't want to just say good remake, we want to make it solid. Yeah. Maybe we can get them trending. That would be awesome, wouldn't it?
Fire remake.
Yeah, fire remake. There you go. Yeah. Go with the hip trends. But like we've always said before, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor. We're getting into other wonderful podcast sites and zones, and as they become available, we'll make sure that you are aware. But to easily track everywhere we are, you can go to pencilpaperproductions.com/horrorramblings. All these links will be down below for easy access, and then tell your friends to go find it, and I'll make sure to put all the little links to all our little podcast places. You may have your own preferred spot, but what would be amazing is if you can go to Apple Podcasts, you can go to Spotify and give us a 5-star rating, and then tell people, hey, this is an amazing podcast, and we love it, and we want the entire world to know about it, and get your horror fix. So yeah, do all those things. Help us out. Help us grow the show.
We want to
appreciate it.
We want to keep giving you guys great content. And until next time, guys, I'll just say this. Stay spooky out there.
This has been the Horror Ramblings Podcast. Join us next time for even more horror.
This has been a Pencil and Paper Podcast Network production.